I was sitting in my car outside his building when the rain finally stopped. The wipers had been off for maybe 10 minutes, but I hadn't moved. My hands were still on the steering wheel, even though the engine was cold. The hoodie sat folded in my lap like something fragile, something I wasn't supposed to be holding. It was past midnight. The streetlights turned everything yellow and soft, the kind of light that makes the world feel distant, like you're watching your own life through old film. I could see the glow from Jonah's window on the third floor. I wondered if he was still awake. I wondered if he was wearing the other one. Earlier that night, we'd been at the office. Just the two of us, finishing up a project that should have been done weeks ago. The building had that hollow feeling it gets after hours, all the fluorescent hum and empty desks. We'd been joking around, the way you do when you're tired and a little punchy from too much coffee. And then Jonah had grabbed my hoodie from the back of my chair and pulled it over his head, grinning like a kid. I'd laughed. It had seemed harmless. He looked ridiculous in it, the sleeves too long, the shoulders swallowing him. But then he'd gone quiet, tugging the collar up near his face, breathing in. And when he asked if he could keep it, his voice had gone soft in a way that made my chest tighten. He said it smelled like me. He said that like it meant something. I hadn't known what to say. I just nodded, told him sure, whatever. But inside, something had cracked open. Something I'd spent years keeping sealed. Now I was here, parked outside his apartment, holding a second hoodie I'd pulled from my closet before leaving the house. I didn't know why I'd brought it. I didn't know what I was doing. My wedding ring caught the light when I moved my hand, a thin band of gold that suddenly felt like a shackle. I thought about Evelyn, asleep in our bed. I thought about the kids, probably tangled in their blankets, dreaming about nothing more complicated than school and friends and what was for breakfast. I thought about the lawn I'd mowed that afternoon, the silence of the dinner table, the polite distance that had grown between me and everyone I was supposed to love. And then I thought about Jonah, the way he looked at me when he spoke, the way his laughter felt like sunlight breaking through fog, the way he'd worn my hoodie like it was something precious. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and closed my eyes. My whole life, I had been careful. I had been the man people expected me to be. Steady, reliable, safe. I had built everything around that steadiness, brick by brick, year by year. And now, sitting here in the dark with rain still dripping from the trees, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't come back from. The hoodie was warm in my hands. I held it closer, feeling foolish and desperate and more alive than I had in decades. Somewhere above me, behind that lit window, Jonah was probably asleep, wearing my scent, dreaming of things I didn't have the courage to name. I stayed in the car for another hour, the city breathing around me, before I finally started the engine and drove home. The house was dark when I got back. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at the shape of it against the night sky. 2 stories. Colonial style. White siding that Evelyn had insisted on repainting 3 years ago. A front porch with planters she filled with seasonal flowers. Right now, it would be Mom's. Rust-colored, maybe some deep purple ones mixed in. I'd lived here for 16 years. Longer than I'd lived anywhere else in my life. Inside, everything was exactly where it should be. I took off my shoes by the door, the way Evelyn preferred. Hung my keys on the hook. Walked past the photographs lining the hallway without looking at them, though I knew every single one by heart. Our wedding day. The kids as babies. Beach vacations and Christmas mornings. Birthdays and graduations that hadn't happened yet, but probably would, in frames waiting to be filled. The kitchen was clean. Evelyn always cleaned the kitchen before bed. I could see her flower arrangement on the windowsill above the sink, backlit by the neighbor's porch light. She was good at things like that, making spaces beautiful, creating the illusion of warmth. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the counter, listening to the house settle around me. Upstairs, someone shifted in bed. Probably my son, who slept restlessly. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the microwave blinked 1:47 a.m. This was my life. This quiet house. This careful order. I thought about how I'd built it, piece by piece, decision by decision. I'd met Evelyn in college, at a campus ministry event I'd attended because it seemed like the right thing to do. She'd been kind, pretty in an understated way. She'd laughed at my jokes and looked at me like I was someone worth knowing. When she'd introduced me to her parents, they'd approved immediately. Stable. Good prospects. The kind of man who would provide. We'd gotten married 2 years after graduation. I'd proposed because it was time, because everyone expected it, because I didn't know what else to do with the future stretching out in front of me. The wedding had been in a church, of course. 200 guests. Evelyn had cried during the vows. I'd held her hands and meant every word I said, even though some part of me felt like I was reading from a script. The kids came next. First my daughter, then my son 3 years later. I'd been present for both births, had cut both umbilical cords, had held them in the hospital room while Evelyn slept. I'd felt something then. Not quite love, but a deep sense of responsibility. A commitment to being the father they deserved. And I had been. I'd coached Little League, attended every recital and parent-teacher conference, built a treehouse in the backyard that took me 3 weekends. I taught my son to ride a bike and my daughter to change a tire. I'd shown up. I'd provided. I'd been exactly what a father should be. But I'd never felt like I was doing it as myself. I'd felt like I was playing a role. A good role. An important one. But still just a performance. Evelyn and I had stopped sleeping together years ago. Not in any dramatic way. It had just tapered off gradually, the way these things do in long marriages. Now we existed in the same space like friendly roommates. We discussed the kids' schedules and household repairs. We sat together at church on Sundays, her hand occasionally resting on my knee during the sermon. We attended neighborhood barbecues and smiled at the same jokes. People admired us. We were stable, steady, the kind of couple others looked to as an example. I set the glass in the sink and walked upstairs. The bedroom was dark. Evelyn was asleep on her side, facing away from me, her breathing slow and even. I undressed quietly and slipped under the covers, staying on my edge of the mattress. There was a space between us, maybe a foot wide, that neither of us ever crossed anymore. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about Jonah. He'd started at the company 8 months ago. I'd noticed him immediately, though I told myself it didn't mean anything. He was younger than me by at least 15 years. Bright-eyed, enthusiastic about projects I'd long since stopped caring about. He had this way of talking with his hands, of leaning in close when he listened, of touching your shoulder when he laughed. At first, I kept my distance. But Jonah had a way of drawing people in. He'd started joining me for lunch, asking questions about my work, sharing stories about his life. He'd moved to the city 2 years ago, he said, chasing something he couldn't quite name. A sense of belonging, maybe. A place where he could finally feel like himself. I'd understood that more than I wanted to admit. Over the weeks and months, we'd grown closer. Coffee breaks turned into long conversations. Work discussions turned into personal ones. He'd told me about his family, about growing up different in a small town, about the loneliness that followed him even here, surrounded by millions of people. I'd listened, and in listening, I'd started to feel something I hadn't felt in decades. A pull, a recognition, like meeting someone who spoke a language I'd forgotten I knew. I hadn't named it then, hadn't let myself. But tonight, sitting in my car with his building glowing above me, the truth had finally forced itself into words. I wanted him, not in some vague, abstract way. I wanted to know what it felt like to be close to him, to touch him without pretending it was accidental, to hear him say my name in the dark. Beside me, Evelyn sighed in her sleep and pulled the blanket higher. I closed my eyes and tried not to think about how the hoodie had looked on Jonah, how easily he'd worn it, how his voice had softened when he'd asked if he could keep it. I tried not to think about the second hoodie, still folded in my car, still waiting. But even in the darkness, even in the safety of my carefully constructed life, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my daughter calling from downstairs, asking where her soccer cleats were. I got up, put on my robe, and went to help her find them. The day started the way every day started. Breakfast, small talk, the organized chaos of getting everyone out the door. Evelyn kissed my cheek before leaving for work. "I'm showing a house at 10, she said. "I'll be home by 6. I told her I'd pick up dinner. She smiled and touched my arm, a brief gesture of affection that felt like muscle memory. And then I was alone again, standing in the kitchen with the morning light streaming through the window, illuminating her flowers on the sill. I thought about Jonah waking up in my hoodie. I thought about the text he'd sent me last night, after I'd finally driven away. "Thanks for letting me keep it. I've been sleeping in it. It smells like you." I hadn't responded. I didn't know what to say, but standing there in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd built so carefully, I knew something had already changed. Something I couldn't take back. The project that changed everything started 3 weeks before the night with the hoodie. Our department had been assigned a major client presentation, something that needed to be perfect, and somehow Jonah and I had ended up as the lead team. It meant late nights, extended hours after everyone else had gone home. Just the two of us in the office, working under deadline pressure that should have felt stressful, but instead felt like something else entirely. The first few evenings were professional. We focused on the work, kept our conversations centered on deliverables and timelines. But there's something about an empty office at night that changes the atmosphere. The fluorescent lights feel softer. The silence between words stretches longer. You start to notice things you don't notice during the day. I noticed the way Jonah drummed his fingers when he was thinking, the way he'd lean back in his chair and stare at the ceiling when he was stuck on a problem, the way his voice dropped lower when it was just the two of us, like he was sharing secrets instead of spreadsheet data. By the second week, we'd fallen into a rhythm. I'd pick up dinner on my way back from telling Evelyn I'd be late. Chinese food, usually. Sometimes pizza. We'd eat at the conference table, papers spread around us, and somewhere between discussing quarterly projections and design layouts, we'd start talking about other things. Real things. Jonah told me about growing up in a small town in Ohio, how he'd always felt like he didn't quite fit, like he was reading from a different script than everyone around him. How he'd moved to the city thinking everything would click into place, that he'd finally find his people, but the loneliness had followed him here too. He said it casually, picking at his low mane, but I heard the weight underneath it. The years of feeling different, of not belonging. I told him I understood. Not in detail, not in any way that revealed too much, but enough that he looked up from his food and held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Enough that something unspoken passed between us. After that, the conversations got deeper. He told me about relationships that hadn't worked out, about the difficulty of connecting with people who didn't really see him. He talked about loneliness like it was an old companion, something he'd learned to carry. I listened. I didn't share as much, couldn't risk it, but I listened in a way I hadn't listened to anyone in years. And in that listening, I felt something waking up inside me. Something I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten it existed. The night it happened was a Thursday. We'd been at it for 5 hours straight, fueled by bad coffee and the nervous energy that comes with an approaching deadline. It was past 11 when we finally finished the last slide. Jonah leaned back in his chair and exhaled, running both hands through his hair. "We did it," he said. "I think we actually did it." I felt the relief too, but underneath it was something else. Disappointment, maybe, that these nights were ending, that we'd go back to normal office hours, surrounded by other people, unable to have these conversations anymore. Jonah must have felt it too, because he didn't move to pack up his things. Instead, he turned his chair toward me and just sat there, looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm going to miss this," he said. "These nights. Just us." My throat felt tight. I told him we'd still see each other, still work together. He nodded, but his eyes said he knew it wouldn't be the same. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things neither of us was saying. That's when he noticed my hoodie draped over the back of my chair. I'd taken it off hours earlier when the office had gotten warm. He reached for it, almost absently, and pulled it into his lap. "Can I try this on?" he asked, already smiling. That playful grin he got sometimes, like a kid asking permission to do something harmless. I shrugged. "Sure." He pulled it over his head, and I watched as the fabric settled over his shoulders, swallowing his smaller frame. The sleeves hung past his hands. He looked ridiculous and endearing all at once, and I felt something twist in my chest. He laughed, tugging at the sleeves. "I look like I'm drowning in this." I smiled, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's definitely not your size." But then he went quiet. He pulled the collar up near his face and breathed in, closing his eyes. When he opened them again, something had shifted. The playfulness was gone, replaced by something vulnerable and raw. "It smells like you," he said softly. The air in the room changed. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. He didn't take the hoodie off. Instead, he sat there wearing it, looking at me with an expression that made it impossible to pretend I didn't understand what was happening. What had been building between us all these weeks? "Can I keep it?" he asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. I should have said no. Should have laughed it off, made some joke, taken it back. Instead, I heard myself say yes. He smiled, but it wasn't the bright, easy smile I was used to. This one was softer, more honest, like I'd just given him something that mattered. We sat there in the silence of the empty office, him in my hoodie, me trying to control the chaos of feelings rushing through me. Feelings I'd spent my entire adult life pushing down. Feelings I couldn't push down anymore. Eventually, we packed up. I walked him to his car in the parking garage, both of us quiet, the weight of the moment hanging between us. He was still wearing the hoodie. When he unlocked his car door, he turned back to me. "Thank you," he said. "For the hoodie. For these nights. For listening." I told him it was nothing, but we both knew it was everything. He drove away, and I stood there in the concrete cavern of the parking garage, watching his taillights disappear. My hands were shaking. My whole body felt electric with something I couldn't name, didn't want to name, but couldn't deny anymore. I got in my own car and just sat there. I thought about Evelyn at home, asleep in our bed. I thought about my kids, my house, my carefully maintained life. I thought about every choice I'd made that had led me to this moment. And then I thought about Jonah, driving home in my hoodie, breathing in my scent. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Evelyn, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying every moment. The way Jonah had looked in my hoodie, the softness in his voice when he'd asked to keep it, the intimacy of that simple request, loaded with meaning we both understood but hadn't spoken aloud. My phone buzzed on the nightstand around 2 in the morning. I picked it up, careful not to wake Evelyn. It was a text from Jonah. "Thanks for letting me keep it. I've been sleeping in it. It smells like you." I read it 3 times. 4. My heart was racing. I wanted to respond, but I didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to put into words what I was feeling. Didn't know if I should. I set the phone down without replying. But I didn't sleep. I lay there thinking about that hoodie, about Jonah wearing it to bed, about the bridge we'd just crossed without meaning to, about how there was no going back now. Not for me. The catalyst hadn't been dramatic. It had been a simple object, a casual request, a moment of vulnerability. But it had cracked something open inside me that I'd kept sealed for 43 years. And now, lying in the dark next to my wife, I couldn't close it again. The next morning, I went through the motions. Breakfast, getting the kids ready, kissing Evelyn goodbye. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I was thinking about Jonah sleeping in my hoodie. I was thinking about what it meant that he'd told me. What it meant that I couldn't stop thinking about it. I drove to work in a daze, my mind replaying that moment in the office over and over. When I got to my desk, there was a coffee waiting for me. My usual order. A sticky note attached. "Thanks for everything, Jay." I sat down and stared at that note for a long time. Something had begun. Something I couldn't name, couldn't control, couldn't stop. And despite everything I stood to lose, despite the life I'd built and the people who depended on me, I wasn't sure I wanted to. After that night, everything shifted. Not in any obvious way that others would notice. We still worked in the same office, attended the same meetings, maintained the same professional distance in front of colleagues. But underneath the surface, something had fundamentally changed between us. Jonah kept the hoodie. He told me about it in small, careful ways. A text here and there. Casual mentions during our coffee breaks. He'd worn it while watching a movie. He'd slept in it again. Each confession felt like a gift and a burden, something intimate being shared in code. I started responding to his messages. Not immediately, never immediately, but eventually. I'd wait until I was alone, until Evelyn was in another room or the kids were busy with homework. I'd read his words over and over, trying to decode the meaning beneath them, trying to understand what we were doing. We began spending more time together. It started innocuously enough. He'd ask if I wanted to grab lunch, and I'd say yes. We'd take walks after meetings, circling the block under the pretense of needing air. We'd stay late at the office even when there wasn't work that demanded it, finding excuses to be in each other's presence. The conversations deepened. He told me things he said he hadn't told anyone else. About feeling invisible most of his life. About the exhaustion of pretending to be someone you're not. About the specific loneliness of moving through the world knowing you're different, but not being able to name it. Not being able to claim it. I listened with a hunger I didn't know I possessed. Every word he spoke felt like it was pulling something out of me. Some truth I'd spent decades burying. I found myself sharing things too. Not everything. Not the full truth. But fragments. Small admissions about feeling disconnected from my own life. About going through motions without feeling present. About wondering sometimes if this was all there was. He understood. I could see it in his eyes, the way he leaned forward when I spoke, the way he nodded even before I finished my sentences. He understood in a way no one else ever had. One afternoon, we were sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Tuesdays were the days I usually worked through lunch alone. But Jonah had knocked on my office door and asked if I wanted company, and I'd found myself unable to say no. We'd been talking about nothing important. The weather. A project at work. But then he'd gone quiet, stirring his coffee absently, and when he looked up at me, his expression was different. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I felt my pulse quicken. "Sure. Are you happy?" The question landed like a stone in still water. I opened my mouth to give the expected answer, the easy lie. But something in his gaze stopped me. He wasn't asking out of politeness. He was really asking. He wanted to know. "I don't know," I said finally. "I don't think I remember what happy feels like." He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "Me neither. But I feel something when I'm with you. Something close to it." My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. Across from me, Jonah looked vulnerable and brave all at once, and I felt something crack wider in my chest. We left the coffee shop and walked. Not back to the office, but in the opposite direction, through neighborhoods I didn't know, past shops and parks, and people living their lives. We didn't talk much. We just walked side by side, our arms occasionally brushing, and I felt more present in my own body than I had in years. That became our pattern. Lunch walks that stretched longer than they should. Coffee breaks that turned into hour-long conversations. Evening texts that I'd read in bed while Evelyn slept beside me, her breathing steady and even, unaware of the entire world shifting beneath our shared blankets. At home, things started to unravel in small ways. Evelyn noticed my distraction. She'd ask me questions at dinner and have to repeat them because I hadn't heard. She'd tell me about her day, about houses she'd shown and clients she'd signed, and I'd realize minutes later that I hadn't retained a word. "Everything okay?" she asked one evening. "You seem distant lately." "I'm fine," I told her. "Just work stress." She accepted this because she always accepted my explanations. We'd built our marriage on accepting each other's explanations, on not digging too deep, on maintaining the surface piece. The kids noticed too. My daughter asked why I wasn't coming to her soccer games anymore. My son wanted to know if we could work on the model airplane we'd started building months ago, the one that sat half-finished in the garage. I made promises. Soon. Next week. When things settled down at work. But I could see the disappointment in their eyes, the way they were learning not to count on me. I felt guilty. Of course I felt guilty. These were my children, my wife, the people I'd committed my life to. But the guilt couldn't compete with what I felt when I was with Jonah. When I was with him, I felt awake. I felt real. I felt like I was finally living instead of just existing. One evening, about 2 weeks after the Hoodie night, Jonah invited me to his apartment. He said he wanted to show me something for a work project, but we both knew it was an excuse. I told Evelyn I had to work late again. She barely looked up from her laptop when I said it. Jonah's apartment was small, a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old building. It was nothing like my house, where my home was full of family photos and coordinated furniture and Evelyn's careful decorating touches. Jonah's place felt personal. Books stacked on every surface. Art prints tacked to the walls. A guitar in the corner. A life that belonged to one person, shaped by one person's choices. We didn't actually work on anything. We sat on his couch and talked. He made tea. We drank it slowly, our knees almost touching, the space between us charged with everything we weren't saying. At some point, he got up and returned wearing my hoodie. He didn't announce it, didn't make a show of it. He just came back from his bedroom with it on, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't look away. Seeing him in it again, in his own space, felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced in years. More intimate than any moment with Evelyn. More intimate than anything in my carefully constructed life. I wear it a lot, he said quietly, sitting back down. I hope that's not weird. It's not weird, I said, though my voice came out rough. He smiled, pulling his knees up to his chest, the hoodie stretching over them. I like having something of yours. It makes me feel less alone. I didn't know what to do with that admission. With the vulnerability in his voice, with the way he was looking at me. Like I mattered. Like I was someone worth holding on to. I should have left then. Should have made an excuse, gone home to my wife and kids, shored up the walls I could feel crumbling. But I didn't. I sat there on his couch, in his small apartment, watching him wear my hoodie, and let myself feel everything I'd been denying. We talked until almost midnight. About everything and nothing. About the lives we'd lived and the lives we wished we were living. About loneliness and connection and the fear of being truly seen. And underneath every word was the unspoken truth neither of us was ready to name. When I finally left, Jonah walked me to the door. We stood in his narrow entryway, too close, the hoodie still on him, my scent still surrounding him. For a moment, I thought he might touch me. Thought I might touch him. But we both held back, suspended in the terror and possibility of what might happen if we did. Drive safe, he said softly. I will. But I didn't drive straight home. I drove around for an hour, through empty streets, past closed shops and dark houses, trying to understand what was happening to me. Trying to reconcile the man I'd been for 43 years with the man I felt myself becoming. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house was dark. Everyone was asleep. I sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, and thought about Jonah in that hoodie. About the way he looked at me. About how being with him made me feel like I was finally, after decades of sleepwalking, waking up. Inside, I undressed in the dark and slipped into bed beside Evelyn. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling her warmth on one side of the bed and feeling nothing at all. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. Thank you for coming over. For letting me show you my space. For being someone I can talk to. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I typed back, for the first time allowing myself honesty. I'm glad I came. I'm always glad when I'm with you. I hit send before I could stop myself. His response came quickly. Me too. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, my heart pounding. Beside me, Evelyn slept peacefully, unaware that her husband was lying next to her, feeling more connected to someone else than he'd ever felt to her. Unaware that everything we'd built together was beginning to crack at the foundation. The transformation wasn't dramatic. There was no single moment of revelation, no lightning strike of clarity. It was gradual, like water wearing away stone. Day by day, conversation by conversation, text by text, I felt myself changing. Felt the careful walls I'd constructed beginning to crumble. At work, I caught myself watching Jonah when I thought no one was looking. The way he moved through the office, the sound of his laugh, the gestures of his hands when he talked. Everything about him drew me in. At home, I became a ghost. Present but not present. Going through the rituals of family life while my mind was elsewhere. Evelyn stopped asking if I was okay. The kids stopped trying to engage me. We all learned to orbit around the absence I was creating, the space where I used to be. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was hurting people. But I couldn't stop. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was becoming real. Like I was shedding a costume I'd worn so long I'd forgotten it wasn't my skin. Jonah became my world. Not in any way I could acknowledge openly, not in any way that others would see, but in every way that mattered. He was the first thing I thought about in the morning and the last thing before sleep. He was the reason I smiled, the reason my heart raced, the reason I started to imagine a different kind of future. And somewhere in the midst of that transformation, I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, that I'd let myself feel things I couldn't unfeel, that I'd discovered a truth about myself that couldn't be undiscovered. I was falling for him, maybe had already fallen, and there was no going back. The evening it happened was ordinary in every way except one. We'd been at a client meeting that had run long, one of those tedious sessions full of revisions and compromise that left both of us drained. Afterward, Jonah asked if I could give him a ride home. His car was in the shop, he said, and the buses were running slow. I said yes without hesitation. I would have said yes to anything he asked. The drive started in comfortable silence. We were both tired, settling into the quiet that comes after hours of performative professionalism. The city moved past us in streaks of light and shadow. Rain had started to fall, light at first, then heavier, and I turned the wipers on, their rhythm filling the space between us. Jonah was wearing the hoodie. He'd started wearing it to work sometimes, casually, like it was his own. No one else knew it had been mine. To everyone else, it was just a hoodie. But every time I saw him in it, something tightened in my chest. We were about 5 minutes from his apartment when he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Of course. Do you ever think about what your life would be like if you'd made different choices?" I felt the question settle over me like weight. "All the time," I said. He was quiet for a moment, and I could feel him looking at me in the darkness of the car. "What would you change? If you could?" I didn't answer right away. The rain was coming down harder now, the wipers struggling to keep up. "Everything," I wanted to say. "I'd change everything." But instead, I said, "I don't know. I think I'd be braver." "Braver how?" "I'd let myself want what I actually want, instead of what I'm supposed to want." The words hung in the air between us, more honest than I'd intended. I felt exposed, like I'd revealed too much. But Jonah didn't laugh, didn't brush it off. He just nodded slowly. "I think you're braver than you realize," he said softly. I pulled up in front of his building and put the car in park. The rain drummed on the roof, cocooning us in sound. I should have said goodnight then. Should have let him go. But I couldn't make myself. Not yet. Jonah didn't move to get out either. He sat there, the hoodie pulled around him, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Vulnerable. Hopeful. Afraid. "I don't want to go up alone," he said finally. "Would you come inside? Just for a few minutes?" It wasn't late, barely 8 o'clock, but I knew what he was really asking. I knew that saying yes meant crossing another line, one we'd been circling for weeks. I thought about Evelyn at home, probably making dinner, probably wondering when I'd be back. I thought about my kids doing homework at the kitchen table. I thought about every reason I should say no. "Okay," I said. We ran through the rain to the building entrance. By the time we got inside, we were both laughing, breathless, water dripping from our hair and clothes. The stairwell was warm and dim, and we climbed to the 3rd floor in silence, the laughter fading into something heavier. Inside his apartment, Jonah turned on a lamp and offered me a towel. I dried my face and hair while he did the same. The rain had soaked through my shirt, and I could feel it clinging to my skin. Jonah disappeared into his bedroom and came back with a dry shirt, one of his own. "Here," he said, holding it out. "You can't drive home in that." I took the shirt and went to his bathroom to change. When I came back out, Jonah had made tea and was sitting on the couch. The hoodie was still on him, hood pulled up now, his hands wrapped around the mug. I sat down next to him, closer than I normally would. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows. I could smell the tea, something herbal and warm. I could smell my own detergent on the hoodie he wore. "Thank you," he said, "for the ride, for coming up, for everything, really. You don't have to thank me." He set his mug down on the coffee table and turned to face me. "I do, though. You've been the best part of my life these past few months. I don't know what I'd do without you." His words hit me harder than they should have. I felt my throat tighten, felt something rising in me that I'd been holding back for so long I'd almost forgotten it was there. "Jonah," I started, but I didn't know how to finish. He looked at me with those eyes that always seemed to see more than I wanted them to. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I think about you all the time. I know I shouldn't. I know it's complicated, but I can't help it. When I'm wearing this, he touched the hoodie. It feels like you're close to me. Like I'm not so alone. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I should have pulled back. Should have created distance. Should have said something to diffuse the moment. Instead, I heard myself say, "You're not alone." He leaned closer, and I could feel the warmth of him, could see every detail of his face in the soft lamplight. The rain continued outside, and inside that small apartment, the whole world seemed to narrow to just the two of us. "I need you to know something," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Being with you makes me feel like I'm finally alive. Like I've been asleep my whole life, and I'm just now waking up." Jonah's breath caught. I could see his chest rise and fall, could see the way his hands trembled slightly as he reached up to push the hood back from his face. "I feel the same way," he said. We were so close now I could count his eyelashes. Could see the small scar above his eyebrow. Could feel his breath on my face. The space between us was charged, electric, terrifying. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "Neither do I. But I don't want you to leave." His hand moved to my face, fingers light against my jaw, and in that touch was every question I'd been afraid to ask, every answer I'd been afraid to hear. My whole body felt like it was vibrating, every nerve ending alive. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and the moment our lips met, everything else fell away. The guilt, the fear, the life I'd built, it all dissolved, and there was only this. Only him. Only the truth I'd been running from my entire life. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like we were both afraid the other might disappear. But then it deepened, and I felt years of denial cracking apart. I felt myself breaking open. Felt everything I'd kept locked inside rushing to the surface. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Jonah's eyes were bright, his face flushed. The hoodie had fallen back, and I could see the pulse at his throat, rapid and strong. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he whispered. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my hand still on his face, my thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone. "What do we do now?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. I sat there on his couch, the rain falling outside, my heart breaking and mending all at once, and I knew that everything had changed, that I'd crossed a threshold I could never uncross. I kissed him again, softer this time, and felt him melt against me. Felt his hand fist in the fabric of the shirt he'd given me. Felt the hoodie soft between us, still carrying my scent, a reminder of how this had all begun. When we finally separated, I rested my forehead against his, both of us breathing the same air, both of us suspended in this moment that felt outside of time. "I have to tell you something," I said. "Something I haven't been able to say out loud." He waited, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining. "I'm not who I thought I was. Or maybe I am, and I've just been pretending to be someone else. But when I'm with you, I don't have to pretend. I can just be. And that terrifies me, because I don't know what happens next. I don't know how to be this person in the real world." "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," Jonah said. "We can take it slow. We can figure it out together." I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe it could be that simple. But I knew it wasn't. I knew that outside this apartment, I had a wife, children, a whole life built on a foundation that was crumbling beneath me. "I should go," I said, even though every part of me wanted to stay. Jonah nodded, understanding in his eyes. He walked me to the door, and we stood there in the narrow entryway, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. "Will I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes." He reached up and touched my face one more time, his thumb brushing across my lower lip. "Drive carefully." I left his apartment in a daze, the rain still falling, the city blurred through the windshield. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, my fingers touching my lips, trying to hold on to the feeling of his kiss, trying to understand what I'd just done. I knew, sitting there in the dark, that I'd reached a point of no return, that I couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't go back to sleepwalking through my life. I'd tasted something real, something true, and it had changed me irrevocably. The drive home felt like crossing between two worlds. With every mile, I felt the weight of my other life settling back onto my shoulders. The wedding ring on my finger felt heavier. The house waiting for me felt like a trap, but underneath all that weight was something new. A truth I could finally name. I wanted Jonah. Not just in some abstract, theoretical way. I wanted him with my whole being. And in wanting him, I'd finally admitted to myself what I'd always known but never allowed myself to feel. I was in love with him, and nothing would ever be the same. I came home that night to find Evelyn waiting up for me. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, still in her work clothes, her face unreadable in the overhead light. "You're late," she said. Not accusatory, just stating fact. "The meeting ran over," I told her. "Then I had to give a coworker a ride." She nodded slowly, her fingers wrapped around her mug. "Nathaniel, we need to talk." My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought she knew. Thought somehow she'd seen through me. Seen the kiss still burning on my lips. Seen the truth I'd finally admitted to myself. But when she spoke again, her words were different than I expected. "You've been distant for months now. I've tried to give you space, tried not to push, but I can't ignore it anymore. You're here, but you're not here. The kids notice it too. They ask me what's wrong with you." I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of her words, feeling the years of our marriage pressing down on the moment. "I'm sorry," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Sorry isn't enough. I need to know what's happening. Are you unhappy? Is it me? Is it us? Her voice cracked on that last word, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. Fear. She was afraid of losing me, afraid of this marriage ending, even though we'd both been going through the motions for so long. "It's not you," I said, and it was true. It had never been about her. She'd been everything she was supposed to be, everything I'd thought I wanted. Then what is it? I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd spent 16 years with, this woman who'd given me children and a home and a life that looked perfect from the outside. And I knew I had to tell her something. Maybe not everything, not yet, but something. "I don't know if I'm the person you think I am," I said carefully. "I don't know if I'm the person I thought I was." Her eyes narrowed slightly, trying to understand. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm lost. It means I've been pretending for so long I don't know what's real anymore." She was quiet for a long moment, her tea cooling between her hands. "Are you having an affair?" The question hung in the air. I could have lied, could have denied it, but I was so tired of lying, so tired of pretending. "Not in the way you think," I said. "That's not an answer, Nathaniel." "I know." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "Do you love someone else?" I couldn't say yes, couldn't say no. I just sat there, frozen, while she watched me with growing understanding. "Oh God," she said softly. "You do." "Evelyn, I don't." She held up a hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. I just need to know. Is there someone else?" "Yes," I said finally. The word felt like a confession and a release all at once. She turned away from me, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, I thought she was crying, but when she turned back, her face was dry, her expression hard. "How long?" "It's not what you think." "How long, Nathaniel?" "I don't know. Months, maybe. But nothing happened until tonight." She laughed, a bitter sound. "Nothing happened. What does that mean?" "It means I've been trying to fight it, trying to be who I'm supposed to be. But I can't anymore." "Who is she?" I felt my throat close. That was the question I'd been dreading, not because I didn't want to answer, but because the answer would change everything. "It's not a she," I said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Evelyn's face as understanding dawned, as every assumption she'd made about our marriage, about me, about our entire life together, crumbled. "You're telling me you're gay?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I am. I just know that I've been living a lie, and I can't do it anymore." She sank back into her chair, her face pale. All these years, and you've been lying to me." I wasn't lying. I was trying to be what everyone expected. What I expected of myself. That's still lying, Nathaniel. To me. To the kids. To yourself. I know. She put her face in her hands, and now she was crying, quiet sobs that shook her shoulders. I wanted to comfort her, wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but I knew I'd forfeited that right. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, her voice muffled. "Do you want a divorce?" Do you want to pretend this conversation never happened? What? I don't know. I just know I can't keep living like this. She looked up at me, her eyes red. And the person you've been seeing? Do you love him? The question pierced me. I thought about Jonah, about his smile, about the way he made me feel alive, about the hoodie and the conversations and the kiss that had changed everything. Yes, I said. I think I do. Evelyn stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this right now. I can't sit here and listen to you tell me about being in love with someone else while wearing your wedding ring at my kitchen table. She walked out, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the bedroom door close. I sat alone in the kitchen, the weight of what I'd done settling over me like a shroud. The next few days were unbearable. Evelyn moved through the house like a ghost, barely speaking to me, sleeping in the guest room. The kids sensed something was wrong, but didn't know what. My daughter asked if we were getting divorced. I told her I didn't know. The honesty in that answer seemed to frighten her more than a lie would have. I still went to work. Still saw Jonah. He knew something had happened, could see it in my face, but I couldn't talk about it yet. Not until I figured out what I was going to do. One evening, about a week after my conversation with Evelyn, she asked me to sit down with her. We went to the living room, that formal space we never used except for guests, and sat on opposite ends of the couch. I've been thinking, she said, about what you told me, about what it means for us. I waited, my heart pounding. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel like our entire marriage has been a lie. But I also understand, in some way, that you've been hurting too, that you've been trapped. I didn't say anything. I didn't deserve her understanding. But I can't stay married to someone who's in love with someone else. Someone who can never fully love me the way I deserve to be loved. I know. The kids need to know something. Not everything, but something. We need to tell them we're separating. That we've grown apart. Okay. And you need to figure out what you want. Who you are. You can't keep living in this limbo. She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of actually leaving, of dismantling the life we'd built, terrified me. I've already talked to a lawyer, she continued. I'm not trying to hurt you or take anything from you. I just want this to be as clean as possible. For everyone. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. You should find somewhere else to stay, she said. The kids and I need space. We need to adjust to this without you here confusing things. Where should I go? I don't know, Nathaniel. Maybe you should ask him. The bitterness in her voice was deserved. I'd earned every ounce of her anger, her pain. I stood up, feeling unsteady. I'm sorry, I said. For everything. For not being who you needed. For taking so long to figure this out. For hurting you and the kids. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix this. Nothing fixes this. I went upstairs and packed a bag, my hands shaking. I could hear Evelyn crying in the guest room, and the sound tore at me. I'd done this. I'd broken our family. I'd shattered the life we'd built. Before I left, I stopped outside my children's rooms. My daughter was at a friend's house. My son was doing homework, headphones on, oblivious. I watched him for a moment, this boy I'd helped create, this life I was responsible for, and felt the full weight of what I was about to do. I went back downstairs. Evelyn was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, waiting. I'll tell the kids tomorrow, she said, that you're staying somewhere else for a while, that we're working through some things. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for them. I walked to the door, my bag in hand. At the threshold, I turned back. She was still standing in the kitchen, framed by the light, and for a moment, she looked like the girl I'd met in college. Young, hopeful, believing in a future that would never come. I removed my wedding ring. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped it. I set it on the small table by the door, that little table where we kept our keys, where we dropped our mail for 16 years. The ring sat there, a small circle of gold, the end of everything. Evelyn saw, but said nothing. I opened the door and walked out into the night, carrying my bag, carrying the weight of every choice that had brought me to this moment. I sat in my car for a long time before I could bring myself to start the engine. I thought about calling Jonah, but I didn't know what to say. Didn't know if he'd want me now that everything was real, now that the fantasy had become consequence. Finally, I drove. Not to Jonah's apartment. Not yet. but through the city, past familiar streets and unfamiliar ones, trying to understand who I was now that I'd finally chosen truth over comfort. My phone rang. It was Jonah. I heard myself answer. Hey, where are you? His voice was soft, concerned. Driving. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay, but I think I will be. Do you want to come over? I thought about his apartment, about the safety I felt there, about the possibility of building something real. Yes, I said. I'll be there soon. I'll be waiting. I hung up and turned the car toward his neighborhood, toward the unknown, toward the terrifying possibility of becoming myself. I'm sitting in my car again, outside Jonah's building. It's been 3 weeks since I left my house with a single bag. 3 weeks since I placed my wedding ring on that table and walked away from everything I'd built. The night is quiet. No rain this time. Just clear darkness and the yellow glow of streetlights. I can see his window on the 3rd floor. The light is on. He's waiting for me, the way he said he would. In the passenger seat is another hoodie. Not the one he kept, but a different one. I'd washed it this afternoon, folded it carefully, and now it sits there like an offering, like a promise. These past 3 weeks have been the hardest of my life. I've been staying in a hotel, a generic room that smells like cleaning solution and other people's lives. I've had dinners with my children where they asked questions I couldn't fully answer. I've signed papers that will end my marriage. I've sat in that hotel room at night and questioned every decision that brought me here. But I've also felt something I haven't felt in decades. Relief. Like I've been holding my breath for 43 years, and I'm finally exhaling. Jonah has been patient. He hasn't pushed, hasn't demanded anything. He's just been there, steady and sure, letting me figure things out at my own pace. We've had coffee. We've talked on the phone late at night. But I haven't been back to his apartment since that first kiss. Haven't let myself go further until I knew I was ready. Tonight, I'm ready. I think about my daughter, who cried when Evelyn told her I was moving out. I think about my son, who went quiet and hasn't called me since. I think about Evelyn, who's been civil but distant, who's moving forward with her life in ways that don't include me anymore. I think about the cost of this choice, the family dinners I'll miss, the milestones I'll witness from the outside, the reputation I've lost, the church community that will whisper about me, the life that looked so perfect and felt so empty. And then I think about Jonah, about the way he looks at me like I'm someone worth knowing, about the conversations that make me feel seen, about the possibility of living honestly, of being loved for who I actually am instead of who I've pretended to be. There's grief in this moment, real grief for what I'm leaving behind, for the people I've hurt, for the simpler life I'll never have. But underneath the grief is something else. Hope, maybe, or just the fragile beginning of truth. I pick up the hoodie and hold it close for a moment. It smells like detergent and fabric softener, clean and uncomplicated. Not like the one Jonah kept, worn and carrying my scent. This one is different. This one is about starting fresh. My hands aren't shaking anymore. I'm not frozen by indecision. I know what I'm doing, even if I don't know how it will all turn out. I know that I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing honesty. I'm choosing the terrifying possibility of real love. I open the car door and step out into the night. The air is cool, and I can hear the distant sound of traffic, of the city breathing. I walk toward the building entrance, the hoodie folded over my arm, and with each step, I feel lighter. At the door, I pause. I think about turning back, about the safety of the hotel room, about how much easier it would be to keep running. But I don't turn back. I press the buzzer for apartment 3B. Jonah's voice comes through the intercom, soft and warm. Come up. The door unlocks with a buzz, and I step inside. The stairwell is the same as it's always been, dim and narrow, but tonight it feels different. Tonight it feels like I'm walking towards something instead of away from something. I climb the stairs slowly, deliberately, letting myself feel every step. At the 3rd floor, I see his door is already open. He's standing there in the doorway, wearing the original hoodie, my hoodie, and when he sees me, his face breaks into a smile. You came, he says. I told you I would. He steps back to let me in, and I cross the threshold into his small apartment. It feels different now, knowing I'm not just visiting. knowing this is a choice I'm making with open eyes. I brought you something, I say, holding out the hoodie. He takes it, unfolding it carefully, and looks up at me with those eyes that see everything. A new one. A new one. He pulls it on over the one he's already wearing, layered, and somehow that feels right. The old and the new. What we've been and what we're becoming. We stand there in his narrow entryway, close enough to touch, but not touching yet. There's so much I want to say. About the past 3 weeks, about the divorce papers, about my children, about the fear and the hope and everything in between. But Jonah speaks first. You don't have to explain anything. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be here. I am here, I say. For real this time. He reaches for my hand, and when our fingers intertwine, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. Like this is where I was always meant to be. He leads me into the apartment, and I let him. Let myself be led towards something unknown, something uncertain, something real. Outside, the city continues its rhythm. Cars pass, lights flicker, other lives unfold in countless windows. But here, in this small apartment, in this quiet moment, I'm exactly where I need to be. The camera of my memory lingers on this. 2 men standing in a modest living room, wearing hoodies that smell like laundry detergent and possibility, holding hands while the world keeps turning. It's not dramatic. It's not a grand gesture. It's just honest. And for the first time in my life, honest feels like enough. I think about the man I was, sitting in his car outside this building months ago, terrified and frozen. I think about how far I've come, how much I've lost, how much I've found. Jonah squeezes my hand, and I squeeze back. We'll figure it out, he says. One day at a time. One day at a time, I repeat. And in that agreement, in that simple exchange, I feel something settle. Not resolution, exactly. Not a happy ending tied up neatly. But the beginning of something true. I'm 43 years old, and I'm just now learning who I am. I'm just now learning what it means to want something and let myself have it. I'm just now learning that it's never too late to choose yourself. The grief will come in waves. I know that. There will be hard days ahead, difficult conversations, losses that ache in ways I can't yet imagine. But there will also be this. These quiet moments of connection. These small acts of courage. This slow, steady building of a life that's actually mine. Jonah pulls me toward the couch, and we sit together, his head resting on my shoulder, both of us wrapped in fabric that carries promises we're learning to keep. Outside, the street is empty and still. The night stretches ahead of us, full of questions we don't have answers to yet. But we're here, together, finally honest, finally free. And that, I'm learning, is where everything begins.